Today on CityCast Austin, y'all are not going to believe how much food Austinites waste. And at the same time, how many people in the Austin area are food insecure. To address this, the city and county have come up with the Austin-Travis County Food Plan, and our guest today is going to break it all down. CityCast Austin is brought to you by our exclusive launch sponsor, Tecovas. It's Thursday, October 24th. I'm Nikki Devon, and this is what Austin's talking about. Hello, I am here with Angela Baucom, Food and Climate Program Coordinator for the City of Austin. So I keep hearing about this food plan, and it's like a first of its kind roadmap to fight food insecurity and halt the loss of farmland. And just immediately, why is this needed in the Austin area?
Austin is a wonderfully blossoming city. It is a constantly growing beast. And with that comes all of the complications of infrastructure that doesn't quite keep up. Not only that, but we have constructed this thing called Austin on a place that has gone through a lot of historical change. So we've seen everything from the lands being stolen from the peoples who were here first to then redlining our master plan that was actually instituted by the city in the 1920s, literally drew the red lines around areas of our city that were then underserved systemically, that were cordoned off and given less access to some of the things that make our city beautiful and make it possible to thrive here. And so what we're doing now is deconstructing a lot of those past injustices and seeing all of the cracks and the fissures that were created and trying to address some of those things, create bridges and to fix systems where we can so that we're actually creating a baseline for the entire city to thrive the way we all hope it can.
I love it. And so how much money is this plan and its implementation expected to cost?
That is a really big question, and it's a little bit impossible.
Right.
I wish to say that, we've got a whole budget with, this many $1 million. But when it comes down to it, the scope of this plan is not just what can the city accomplish and fund, but it's also embedded in a lot of community structures. It's embedded in nonprofit, for-profit, farmland, workers. We are working to find a little bit more information about how each one of these pieces is going to be implemented. And in the back of the food plan, folks who really want to dig into the details, they can read in the appendix, hey, this is what we think it's going to cost between a low investment, a medium investment, and a high investment. But those investment tiers are really hard to put into lay terms of dollars because a low investment for the city might mean we can do this with staff time we already have, or maybe we can put a few $1,000s behind something. But a high investment might mean it's going to take an entire new position, or it's going to take funding an organization at the tune of millions of dollars. So it's really hard to put a dollar amount on it. But what I can say is it's going to take several years to figure out exactly what some of these pieces are going to cost. And the county and the city are starting to create expectations and structures for committing to fostering that development as we can.
I appreciate defining cost in terms of not just money, but it's also staff and time and departments and entire organizations, because I think I wasn't even thinking that until you said it, but that's a really good point. It's much larger than a dollar amount. So how long has this plan been in the works, and where did this idea come from?
There are a lot of people who tell you a lot of different stories, but I think that if we trace it back to 10 years ago, we can see the seeds of it in the creation of plans from our food policy board and our city food policy manager. when it really became a thing was with a resolution in 2021 by our city council. And that resolution said, we need a 5-year plan. We need to address all of these systemic inequities that are preventing Austinites from having the food that they need to thrive and that are preventing the stability of our city during times of upheaval. We saw it really intensely during COVID. We saw it really intensely during Winter Storm Uri. We see it anytime there is a disruption in the supply chain. And when I say supply chain, I think it's always really important to highlight almost all of the food in Austin comes from outside of the Central Texas region.
Yeah.
It is just a huge network that gets the food here that people can eat. And so if anything messes with that, we have about 3 days to figure it out before people start to see those empty shelves that make us all panic and want to buy, 10 million truckloads of toilet paper.
Let's talk a little bit about that, because in 2021, I was working at District 1, and for Winter Storm Uri, we had this huge thing at the Millennium Youth Complex where places from all over the city, all over the state, really, they were donating food and water, and it was just a huge deal. So let's talk about this. Just how did the pandemic and Winter Storm Uri in 2021 affect access to food in the Austin area that you know of?
I would say on the structural side of things, we had situations where we had to figure out really, really quickly how to get food over impassable roads. And a lot of what we saw being successful in those situations were small neighborhood level solutions. So it wasn't necessarily about getting the food to these big truckload type of distribution structures that we're used to using. It wasn't about getting food to HEB. It was about getting food to neighbors so that they could redistribute to neighbors.
Right.
It was about finding the people who were activated and had the mobility in their area to check in on people and to get that food where it needed to be. And so relying on this huge network of community-based organizations was absolutely essential. From that was born this now kind of reinforced communication web. And that web has since continued to come together. The city, for example, has monthly calls where we just offer a space for people to talk about updates. There's representation from Homeland Security and Emergency Management and from our team within the Office of Sustainability. And there's also representation from those community-based organizations and just individuals within their community who are a part of this known network.
Right.
So those are open to a lot of cooperation. So we saw the advantage of having to face hardship and becoming more resilient as a result and learning from that. But I know that still, even though those things exist, I was checking on people that I care about, across town from me who were still like, yeah, I'm fine, but I'm eating Oreos and peanut butter for every meal because that's what I have.
Right.
And when you have people who are technically surviving, but that isn't a sustainable model, and that is still a crucial emergency situation, we know we need to do better. We know we aren't hitting every person, and we know we aren't setting every neighborhood up for success. So it's a constant effort of learning from whatever we may face together as a community and really intentionally listening to what is happening on that community level and using that to inform all of the processes going forward.
Yeah, learning from our mistakes and doing better.
Yep.
So back to the resolutions. After the resolution was passed, people working on the plan then got into doing some research.
Mm-hmm.
What were y'all trying to figure out with this research, and what did you learn?
So we had already gotten into research about the food system. And in 2022, the State of the Food System report was published by our office. And we learned some really jarring things that we knew on a surface level, but hearing the numbers can be really startling. So when I said not much of our food is produced locally, 0.06% of the food that is eaten in Austin and Travis County is actually grown in this region.
Whoa, that's such a small number. Oh my gosh.
And that signals a lot of different things, right?
Wow.
That's not only the stores, sourcing from outside of this area. That says, where are the farmers?
Right.
And are the farmers sending food into Austin, or are they finding it more lucrative to send it out of Austin? So we've got nice farmers markets here. Why aren't we getting more of our food from the people who come to those farmers markets? Is it because of people not being able to get to the farmers markets? Or is it because the farmers don't want to come to the farmers markets? It brings up all of these questions. So we saw that 1.24 million pounds of food is wasted every day in Austin as of 2022.
What? I just want to be very clear about what wasted means. What's considered wasted food?
Wasted food is food that is meant for human consumption, that gets to the consumer, but isn't eaten. So that can be food that is thrown away. It can be food that goes bad in the fridge. It can be stuff, those leftovers that kind of left behind at the restaurant because you forget you're walking out, talk to your friends.
Yeah.
It's all sorts of sources. When food goes to landfill from any of those sources, it is especially bad for our environment. So wasted food is not only about making sure it's eaten by people. That's our first concern, of course, but it's also about making sure that it doesn't get to the landfill and start to produce methane, because those foods that end up thrown away in the trash, even those scraps that are stuck inside the containers and in the bags and all of that, those, once they start to decompose, create methane. And methane is many times more harmful to our environment than CO2. So we talk about carbon footprint all the time. We also need to incorporate into that conversation methane and how bad that can be and how preventable it is in the case of food.
So that waste number, what you said, 1.2 million tons?
Pounds.
1.2 million pounds.
Mm-hmm.
That doesn't even include food that we tried to compost.
We really want all of the food in Austin to go to compost. We want to think, oh my gosh, compost is a great solution. That is still throwing it out.
Mm-hmm.
It's going to a better place. We are mitigating the methane, but that is still food that is thrown out. That is food that was meant to be eaten and is thrown out.
You are blowing my mind right now, Angela. You're blowing my mind.
The best and first thing that food should be used for is eaten,
Consumption
first by humans, by animals, secondarily. It's about getting it where it's meant to go before it turns into something we have to throw away and deal with. Because you think about, you've got to get compost towed away, that takes a truck. And then it has to go somewhere. It has to be worked. It has to be properly handled in order to prevent pests, in order to create that mitigation to the methane that could be produced if it's trapped in a landfill. So there are lots of things that need to be done before we even get to that point of tossing it into the compost bin. And I know there's a lot of feelings about okay, it's so much better if I compost it. I don't have to consider it wasted if it's composted. That's still in the waste system.
I feel like there's going to be so many people that are just going to be like, no. Hey y'all, it's Nikki. I have to tell you about Tecovas boots. I finally have a pair, and I don't know if y'all know this, but they're handmade, high quality, and stylish. And they're comfortable right outside of the box. Now, I know we buy everything online these days, but trust me, you have to get fitted for some boots at Tecovas. Now, whether you're like me, a newbie to boots, or you have a closet full of them, the folks at Tecovas will help you find your next favorite pair. So, grab a friend, head on over to the Tecovas flagship on South Congress or their store at the Domain. Plus, good news, they just opened a store in Georgetown at 709 Main Street for those of you that live just a little further north. With 3 locations in town, you have no excuses. So, that's tecovas.com, TECOVAS.com. Don't go gently, y'all. So let's talk briefly about what's the goal? What are the goals of the Austin Food Plan?
Well, first and foremost, we don't want people in Austin to experience food insecurity. And food insecurity, for folks who maybe aren't as familiar with that term, is about people not having access to enough or the right foods for them to thrive. And thriving looks different for everyone. The type of food that people need is different for everyone. It can be cultural, it can be medical, lots of different needs in our community around food. So, any disruption to that, and you're risking kind of the simplest definition that I believe Feeding America uses for food insecurity is you're at risk of not knowing where your next meal comes from. 14.4% of people in Travis County are considered to be food insecure as of that 2022 report. That number has not gone down.
Wow.
And we are looking at both that messy statistic of 1.24 million pounds of food wasted, right next to 14.4% of people not having access to enough food to thrive. And that is something that we see as an opportunity. We've identified that we've got this problem of a lot of food that needs to go somewhere. We've got this other problem of a lot of people that need access. So we are concentrating a lot on being able to put not necessarily put infrastructure into place. We're in the process of supporting existing and expanded solutions that will help to reroute some of that food where it needs to go. And I wish it were that easy. I wish we could say, take all the food that's wasted and give it to people. But if we look at the food that's wasted, so much of it is food that, like I said before, has gone bad in the fridge. It's leftovers from the restaurant. It is scraps from your table. And those aren't fit to give to people. So that leads us to this interesting question about how do we increase that availability of that local food? And we have to look at, well, who's producing it? Can people produce it themselves? Great. Community gardens, gardens at people's homes, those are wonderful. That creates what we call food sovereignty, where someone can identify and control the means of their own food access.
I love that. I love that.
Well, it gets one of the things that I think has been crucial to the entire experience around food planning is that food justice is the center of everything we do. If looking at food production and farming and labor and food insecurity and health and then food waste, we need to look first at those populations that were affected most by the redlining, were affected most by the stealing of indigenous lands, were affected most by the economic inequities that have been perpetuated by not just Texas society and Austin society, but by American society. So we're looking at racial discrimination, class discrimination, sex discrimination.
Yeah.
It is a big interconnected layer cake of things that we need to work on as a society. And so by taking that internally and focusing on what it looks like in Austin and where we can have an impact, we made sure that we looked at whose voices were not yet included and found ways to make the table available to them.
Well, so you mentioned existing solutions. What are those existing solutions that are in place?
For people experiencing food insecurity, there are so many wonderful organizations that distribute food throughout the community. There are organizations that specialize in feeding those who are unhoused. So we've got folks like the Trinity Center who makes breakfast available every day, and folks can go and get a meal when they need one. There are teams of people like Meals on Wheels distributing meals directly to people's doors day after day. There are folks like the Food Bank who are distributing food to hundreds of food pantries. These are wonderful resources. And by making sure that those folks are included in our conversation, we can hopefully help to connect them with others who are doing similar work or complementary work, and they can keep doing the great job that they're doing. Or we can strategize, well, how do we resource this? Is there a way that we can provide funding, which is, of course, a rare, beautiful thing at the city to be able to provide, but also access and structural supports that will help them to do their job how they want to do their job.
And sometimes that makes all the difference, just making something accessible in that way.
Mm-hmm.
Like that red tape can be really daunting for people. So
Yeah.
the resolution was recently adopted by Austin City Council, and you mentioned that Travis County will approve it soon too. What happens next?
So in the food plan, we've got a set of 9 goals. And under those 9 goals, we have 62 different strategies.
Wow.
So the goals are kind of like the big focus points, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So we want to set some directions to look towards in those goals. And then in the strategies, we actually describe what it would look like to take steps towards that in the next 5 years. So we've got some ideas, and we've got community partners already engaged from our food planning process. We get to help to ferry it forward. But when I say we, that's a big complicated we. It is not just a Office of Sustainability or a City of Austin or even Travis County. It is an interwoven team that crosses sectors. It includes for-profit, nonprofit, government, individual interested citizens, a little bit of everyone. And it will be a team effort to see who wants to take on individual strategies, who wants to partner on individual strategies, and how we're going to take those forward to actually reaching something that looks like completion in the sense of describing progress towards these items. This is not a finish line situation.
Right.
This is a mountain range.
Right.
We're going to climb the first mountain, and then maybe we hang it down the valley, and we measure our progress so far on the downswing, and then we've got another mountain to climb, and we're going to keep doing that year after year after year.
Now, as the plan is being implemented, as we are on this mountain range, how should we know? How do we know it's working?
It's hard to measure some of these things. Some of the things we've got really clear measures for. For example, so Austin Resource Recovery, which is the waste management organization for the city of Austin and our residents here, they have something called the Universal Recycling Ordinance. And residents aren't always aware of this, but it's something businesses are very aware of. Basically, it's what makes the recycling and the composting available to those single family residences. And it sets up requirements for businesses to have a waste mitigation strategy for their organic waste. So if they're a food permitted business, they have to have a strategy in place to either donate some of their organic waste to compost. They have to have their recycling set up. So there are regulations around what you're supposed to do. Up until now, multifamily properties like apartment complexes have not had to compost the way that single family units have availability of that compost bin. So this year, there's a shift towards requiring multifamily properties to have those green bins, or to have a composting or organic waste diversion is what we call it in the biz. Organic waste diversion strategy. So they have to keep some of that organic waste out of the landfill whenever possible. So we can measure the success of an initiative like that.
Right.
When we are talking about something like reducing food insecurity, that is a very tricky thing to measure, because we can get information about income versus cost of living and see if people are likely to have some of those kind of shortcomings in their monthly finances,
Right.
we can survey people and say, do you know where your next meal is coming from?
How's it going? Yeah.
And I don't know that we're ever going to 100% be able to say that we are able to make progress on that, because we don't have a strategy that addresses all of the things that can affect someone's food security, their finances, their medical situation.
A robust look at why they are where they are. Yeah.
Yeah, that is a whole system of things. And people don't exist in a vacuum.
Yeah. That makes sense.
We've set up things that we can control, and we are going to measure ourselves on the things we can control. And we are hopeful that because we've based that on the input of experts, as well as thousands of community members who participated in this process, that we are addressing the real concerns that people say for themselves are affecting their ability to interact in a healthy food system.
I love this. So, food access affects all of us in Austin. I, for one, I'm someone that, I live in an apartment, so I'm very excited about this new compost thing. But I also have, I have a parent who, getting his meals every day or can be tricky. I know I'm not the only one. It really affects all of us, even if you're someone who at this moment doesn't happen to have to deal with food insecurity. It affects us all. How can people get involved in an informal way or even a formal way? How can people get involved to help?
I think the first thing people can do is take a look at the food plan and see what resonates with them. See if there's something that looks familiar or something that tugs a heartstring. And that's the place to start getting involved. A lot of these things are community based efforts. Look to the many beautiful nonprofit organizations in Austin and find a place to volunteer. Hop onto our website, austintexas.gov/food. And there you can find a few different resources. You can also sign up for our newsletter. We're in the process right now of getting guidance from some of these bigger deciding bodies that we've been taking direction from. The Austin Travis County Food Policy Board, which is a board that helps to inform the city council. They meet monthly to talk about a variety of issues related to the food system. Folks can absolutely attend those meetings. You can attend in person or online, and information about how to do that can be found on the austintexas.gov website. And they will be helping us to figure out what the city's role is in moving this plan forward. And we hope to play a role, a continuing role, in seeing the food plan from this point of adoption all the way to seeing the needle move on all of these different strategies, to seeing someone claim that, say, I want to help out with that, and moving it forward. It's a process that is going to take effort from the individual household level, everything from composting and maybe buying less of that vegetable that you're not going to be able to eat until after it's gone bad. It can be things like, helping out with a neighborhood garden and getting that started. And it can be just things like being a little bit more intentional about how you think about the climate impact of what you're doing. So there are lots of different ways to get involved. And I think that from our perspective, of course, we would love to send our newsletter out to everyone and let them know what we're up to so that we can just keep this movement rolling. We're trying to build a movement of people in Austin who care about the food system, who care about their neighbors, and who care about a community that can flourish and is green and full of food that people can have control over and access of, regardless of their situation.
I love it. I love it. Everyone that's listening, I just want to reiterate what Angela said you can start small. It can be something as simple as just looking at the food plan. Think about a little bit more about what you consume and what you don't consume. And we're probably gonna check in with you some more just as the plan gets going. Thank you for being here.
Thank you so much for having me.
That's all for today here on CityCast Austin. You can find a link to the food plan in our show notes. If you enjoyed the show, why not tell a friend, rate the show, leave us a review, and subscribe to our Hey Austin newsletter. We'll be back tomorrow morning with more news from around the city. Bye, y'all.